I recently saw a meme, and the meme said, I knew my cousin was going to prison when he called the judge Your Majesty. And with us today, we have someone who I consider an inspiration, Hauwa Shehu, who is a barrister for the CPS. The CPS is an acronym for the Crown Prosecution Service. For those who don't know, what is that?
Is that a question to me?
Yeah, that was.
Firstly, thank you so much for the wonderful introduction and inspiration. Thank you. I'm very humbled, honestly. So, Crown Prosecution Service, in a nutshell, is the largest prosecuting agency in England and Wales. So, in lay
Mhm.
people's terms, that means that when you read and hear about criminal cases that happen in the UK, the police investigate it and then they pass it to the CPS, and the CPS are responsible for deciding whether to charge it, who to charge, what to charge, and then we also take the case to court and present it at court, etc., and go through the trial process, and then we're done with it.
Damn, you have all that power in it.
Well, is it power? I think we're going to get into that a bit, but is it power? How much power do we have when we're sort of limited by the system? But no, it's definitely a lot of responsibility. A lot of responsibility.
Of course, I mean, for those who don't know, your background, how you are Nigerian and you're a
Whoop, whoop.
Muslim woman.
Yeah.
Can't come and kill myself from the line. So let's
we
let's
we
tie
call it triple
into.
threat.
Hey, that's what we like to hear. But speaking of that, let's talk about in relation to what we're about to see right now is the ascension to power by Kamala Harris, who is a prosecutor. And she
Yeah,
is being famed as a woman and celebrated as a black, half Indian woman as a prosecutor. Many people who have an issue with her talk about her as her role as a prosecutor and how
yeah.
she was involved many a times in prosecuting cases and she sent many black people to prison and so on and so forth. I mean, her record speaks for itself. And if I'm honest, when I looked at it, it's quite negative. My question then is to you: do you feel in your role at all compromised being a black person? And first of all, even before that, I wanted a yes or no answer.
Mm,
Do you accept that the UK is institutionally racist?
yes.
Good. Okay, now we can unpack the discussion.
Now we
So,
built the
do you feel
foundations.
now I've built
Yeah,
the foundation now? 'Cause it's like it's funny. I talk a lot on Twitter. I talk a lot on social media, and
yeah.
I'm always like to myself, I need to stop debating with people because listen, I can debate you on policy. I can debate you on whether you want to be progressive, moderate, left, right, whatever. But if
Mm.
you're saying the sky is down and the down is up, I can't debate you on those things. You know what I mean?
No, but it's true. You
So
need to know when to just give up the ghost.
exactly. And I feel like we have to debate on established facts, but we've established the fact that we both are in agreement that institutionalized racism is real.
Yeah.
Let's move on now. Do you feel at all compromising in upholding that system?
So another simple question. So initially, I think you phrase the question as like, do I feel compromised being like a black prosecutor? And the
Yeah.
short answer is no. Then you asked it slightly differently. I think I'm being a bit of a lawyer here, but it was slightly nuanced. The second time you asked it, you asked, do I feel compromised supporting the system and essentially being complicit in the system? And that second question, which I'll explain, but I think is slightly different,
Okay.
there are moments and times where I do question whether or not anyone who works in the system, not just as a prosecutor, even a defense advocate, but anyone of us who works in a broken system, whether or not we are complicit in maintaining
Mm,
that broken system. So, firstly, in terms of being a black prosecutor, definitely I don't feel compromised whatsoever. And the interesting thing about being a prosecutor is, firstly, I always say to people that as a prosecutor in the UK, when I first was interested in going into law, interestingly enough, criminal law was not my passion. I thought it was
okay.
the most interesting. I really enjoyed it, but I was applying for a lot of different areas of law. I was applying to qualify as an immigration barrister. I was interested in judicial review and human rights. I was interested in extradition. I was interested in so many different areas. I was actually interested in family law as well and some civil areas of law. But
Okay.
what happens is access into the profession is so difficult. The statistics are
Mm,
completely stacked against you if you're an ethnic minority, more so if you're black, more so if you're a black woman. And don't even, I
absolutely.
haven't even looked at, that intersection with being Muslim, even that would be stacked against you even more. And what happens is you tend to have this wish list and you apply to different places for your qualification. And I had managed to get a lot of work experience in criminal law, so I knew a lot about it. So I was probably on paper a stronger candidate for a criminal pupillage, and a pupillage is the 1 year
Okay.
training you have to do to qualify as a barrister. And I ended up getting a criminal pupillage. So
Okay.
that's great. Now, when I first started doing crime, I always saw myself, I think, as most people of color or many people of color would see themselves, you'll think, I'm going to end up being a defense advocate. I'm going to
Yeah.
defend the man against the system. So, interestingly enough, once I started working within the system as a prosecutor, firstly, you have to understand that it's very, very different to the US. And I say the
Hmm.
role of the prosecutor is very different to the US. In terms of the system, yes, there are similarities which you can talk about, but in terms of the role, it's very, very different. And I say this as someone who spent a year working in the system
In
in
the
the
US.
US. So
Yeah.
I do know this. In the US, being a prosecutor is very political. So you have
Hmm.
these state attorneys and district
Yep.
attorneys, and it's all about who's been elected. And
Yep.
they have different mandates that maybe this year we need to win more votes by showing that we are tough on drugs, or we are tough on this crime, or we need to lock up this many people. And as we know, the death penalty in the US, very political, also very religious, right? So if you're
Yep.
in a state where you've got a lot of Christians of a certain leaning, then actually imposing the death penalty can win you more votes. In the UK, we don't have any of that as individual
Yes.
prosecutors. We do not have any of that. And actually, the head of the CPS is called the Director of Public Prosecutions.
Yep.
Bit of education for people. The current DPP is Max Hill QC, one
Wasn't
that
it?
many
Wasn't it Keir Starmer at one
I was
point?
just about to say one that many people will know was Keir Starmer.
The
We had
Labour leader.
exactly, the current Labour leader. So he was once Director of Public Prosecutions, but that role is actually
Hmm.
created by legislation. So although as a prosecutor in the UK, you are employed by the government, we're like an independent government
Body.
department. So we're
Okay.
non-ministerial. And I feel like
Yeah.
that independence is literally what makes it very, very different. So our role as prosecutors, we are literally supposed to be there not only to
Hmm.
support victims and witnesses and make sure that they get justice, we are also supposed to be fair and fair to the defense and make sure the right defendant is prosecuted for the right crime. And we have like no link, we're completely independent from the police to be sure that we are also keeping the police in check and questioning their decisions if they are wrong. And I think that's such an important distinction. So when I first started doing it, I thought to myself, I felt as though there was no fairer role to be in than being a prosecutor. Now, people always ask defense advocates things like, oh, how can you defend a murderer? How can you defend a rapist? How can you defend a pedophile?
Yeah.
And it's all about believing in justice and believing
Hmm.
that everyone has the right to a fair trial and all that kind of thing. And of course, I believe in all of those things. But do I prefer to be the person that's locking up the pedophiles and ensuring that the innocent people are not being prosecuted? Yeah, I would choose it every day, every single day. And I also
I
think,
mean,
sorry,
okay,
go on,
carry on.
Mamadou.
No, no, I think that's a beautiful spin. I,
I
lo- I, I think that's a
love
beautiful.
how
No,
you
no, no.
called it a spin. No, but go on.
I think that's a beautiful take, and I take that many may not have considered before, an angle that many people are not privy to. But let's talk about let's talk. Where court is in session, as it were. Let's
Yeah.
talk about the facts and the evidence of what's on the ground. Yeah,
Mm,
black people are disproportionate. Black men in particular are disproportionately are represented in prison, for
yeah.
example. Yeah, there are overwhelmingly people who go to prison, and the numbers show that black people are disproportionately represented in, especially black men, in the prison system.
Yeah.
So, unless we're gonna argue, and I'm 100% sure you don't agree with this, that black people are inherently more criminal, which
God
as
forbid.
some eugenics, God
God
forbid, some
forbid.
eugenics like to claim, we have to look at the broken system. And what you said just there speaks to, well, we're meant to be fair. We're meant to be fair. So then what's happening there? Where is that contradiction taking place then?
So, where that is taking place is we have fundamental issues and flaws with law enforcement. We already
Hmm.
know that. We know that Black people, particularly Black men, disproportionately, I don't even want to say arrested by the police, but even just in terms of interactions, let's talk about stop and search, let's talk
Yeah.
about, investigations. Black people and Black communities are disproportionately policed as well, right? So
Yeah.
there's a lot more police in predominantly Black areas than there are in other areas. So what you have to understand is that disproportionality goes through sort of every level, every funnel of the system. So if
Hmm.
the police are disproportionately stopping, arresting, and charging, and I say charging, there's only certain things they can charge people for. The rest, it comes
Okay.
to the CPS. If they're disproportionately charging them and stopping them and arresting them at that stage, that means the number that is already being fed to the CPS is always going to be disproportionately higher. Now,
Yeah.
one thing I will say about, and I'm not saying that our prosecution service is perfect. We have issues that we are looking into, that we ensure that our prosecutors are properly trained, or that unconscious bias, which is a word I don't like. But we do a lot of work on that at the CPS
Why don't you like it? Why don't you like
because
it?
I
Tell me.
don't think we've dealt with explicit bias. And I think that we talk about unconscious bias a lot because I think that it's an easier pill for some people to swallow. And I think we're at such a
100%.
crisis that we shouldn't be looking for the easier pill for people to swallow. We need to talk facts and just deal with the facts. But that's an
Hmm.
aside. But what I was going to say is that if you look at every stage of the system, so once they get to court, there is evidence and statistics to show that Black people tend to be convicted at a higher rate, that they
Hmm.
also tend to receive harsher sentences as a higher rate, which then leads to them being disproportionately represented in the prison population. Now,
Hmm.
when the police are dealing with defendants and individuals, right, they can see them. So your race is apparent. When you're in
Yes.
court, the judge and the jury and the magistrates, they can see you. So your race is apparent. Now, when you're dealing with a case file as a prosecutor, there are some things that will be apparent. Let me not even lie, right? Look at my
I
name,
was
look
just
at
about
your
to say,
name.
I was just about
We
to say,
I'm not I'm not Jane Smith. You're not John
exactly.
Smith. But what I was going to say is that a lot of the defendants and a lot of the cases that we deal with, the thing that is jumping out from you at the page is not the name, is not the ethnicity, it's literally the facts of the case. And like this
Hmm.
this I really do believe. However, there hasn't been enough or as much investigation and data looking into the disproportionality of charging decisions. So, are
Hmm.
prosecutors actually charging Black defendants more so than they're charging non-Black defendants? That data isn't there. I suspect that if we and I
That's a
think
very
there are
interesting case
intentions
study.
looking into it. I think there are intentions looking into it because it's
Okay.
something that even David Lammy like had mentioned since he did his like review into the criminal justice
Yeah.
system, and it's something that I know that our sort of policy leads have said we need to find a way to do that and try and get hold of that data so that we can address that. But I think that the issue of the disproportionality, it's a feed through
Okay.
through the whole system. And actually, it definitely starts with the police. And
Okay.
then in terms of the prison population, yes, the CPS has a role to play in that, but actually it's about the sentencing. And then that brings me full circle back to your original question. And I think actually, when there are not Black prosecutors at all in the
Yeah.
system, I think we're in more danger. I think we are in more danger when this. I think part of the reason that the system is so institutionally pitted against people of color is because it's so unrepresentative. And I don't think
Okay.
representation is the magic bullet, by the way, because I think there's a big drive to say let's get more
Exactly.
Black
I mean,
judges, more Black
I meant
lawyers.
exactly. I mentioned this the other day. To be honest with you, I spoke about why I'm flirting with the idea of why we should drop the BAME label because
Oh,
I feel like
flirting with the idea.
it.
Mamadou, let's go. Let's go. It's gone. BAME is not even a thing. What is it? What does it
No,
even
I
mean?
agree. And no, I agree because I feel like it does take away from so much. There are specific concerns that affect black communities, and not to say that there's no intersectionality between black and people of color. However, I feel like by pushing the BAME label, we kind of engage in an erasure of black issues. For example, when Matt Hancock, the health secretary, was asked, "How many black people do you have in your cabinet?" He says, "Well, we have many BAME." Do you see what I mean? You see what I
Yeah.
mean? He was asked a very specific and direct question, and he relied on, "Oh, we have BAME, but we don't have black," for example. I mean, that has changed, just for the record, and I find it problematic. But at the same time, I do recognize that there is an intersectionality between using the kind of BAME issues and of people of color and black people,
I don't know if
as
there
well
is
as
anymore,
okay,
though. I don't
okay,
know if I agree anymore. So there was a time when I did agree, and I thought that
yeah,
actually, do you know what? All minorities have a shared experience to an extent.
yeah,
But there are a lot of issues with the BAME label, and one of them that you've already alluded to is that it literally hides a raft of sins. It hides a
yeah,
raft of sins. It allows an organization, a sector, a group to be able to say, of course, we promote minorities, or of course, we are representative, when actually, if you really look at who those people are, they fall into this massive umbrella, and they could
hmm,
be all South Asian, or
yeah,
they could be of mixed
mm,
heritage and
yeah,
actually be mostly white, but have some black heritage
like
in them, or
white
some
passing, like white
exact
passing.
exactly. So they could be white passing, and so I think that BAME hides too many sins, and as you said, it completely erases some issues that are specific to Black people. And
Hmm.
we're at the stage now where across the board, we are literally seeing that Black people are being treated in a manner of unfairness that is disproportionate to their minority counterparts.
Yeah,
And then don't forget as well, the term BAME essentially makes white the norm and everyone else.
exactly,
So BAME, it just means non-white. We're basically saying, oh,
exactly.
everyone who's not white, and we're clumping you all together. And I think over time as well, one thing that I found really interesting is that the term BAME, it just doesn't translate anywhere else outside of the UK. When I went to the
Exactly.
US, every time I said BAME, they were like, girl, what you talking about? And I'm just like, all right, yeah, Black, Asian, and minority ethnic. And even when you spell it out for them, they're like, what's a minority ethnic? Like, what is that? And I suddenly realized in the UK, we're in this really bizarre bubble. We've come up with
Yeah,
this bizarre terminology. And there are a group of people who think that if we argue too much about the terminology, we're losing sight of actually what's really important. And when we talk about labels, we're getting into identity politics and all that jazz. But I actually think that terminology and
of
language
course,
is
of
so
course,
important. It's so
too
important.
important.
We're not BAME. We're just not, we're not BAME at all.
No, I agree with that, but I'm gonna push back a little bit on the on from what I'm gathering. I don't want to make any assumptions, so I'm gonna ask you. I My kind of philosophy to things is I take a pragmatic approach to politics, but however, my actual philosophy is much more a radical in the good sense, in the good sense than my politics as my politics, for example. For example, what I mean by that is, let's take the cause of defunding the police, for example, and then it extends to abolishing the police. What are your takes on those things?
Defunding the police, I don't agree with. I I don't, and we are talking about in the UK, right? We're talking about in
Yeah,
the UK. I don't think that deals with the issue. I don't think that's
but
what the issue is.
let me push back on that. But okay, what we're saying when people say defund the police, we're saying that police budgets need to be allocated in a way that we reimagine how we deal with law and order in society. For example, if the only tool you have is a hammer, you treat everything like a nail. So, for example, why are police dealing with issues of like maybe things to do with mental health and all these things, for example, when they can be allocated to other services? For example, there was a time where Akala so eloquently speaks on this. There was a time where Glasgow had one of the highest murder rates around the world at one point, particularly in
Mm.
Western Europe. And they took an approach of, they didn't defund the police, fair enough, but took an approach of early intervention. that money was put into early intervention, and they decreased their crime rate, for example. Whereas obviously, again, in England, they haven't done that, particularly in London, they haven't done it. They're taken the approach of heavy policing. We're going to crack down, which has resulted in the disproportionate numbers of black people in prison. So back on the point, I would like to elaborate again. Why do you find the word defund the police problematic, or why don't you think it's a solution?
So I don't think defunding the police is really about redefining law enforcement. I think it's literally
Okay.
about saying the police force in and of itself as a concept is not working or shouldn't exist. But I do agree with that concept of reimagining the police. And yeah, I'm a big Akala fan. I've heard him speak before, read his book Natives, and
Yeah.
there has been a lot of talk. Even there's always it comes up every I feel like it comes up quite often. I almost said like every couple of years, but it's even more frequently than that, where people say that some of the current criminal issues that we're facing in society should be dealt with as public health matters rather
Yeah,
than
and
criminal
I think
matters.
that's a very fair point. If we talk about drug use and drug abuse, I'm definitely someone who believes in decriminalizing of drugs. I don't believe in legalizing. I think people get confused. I believe in decriminalizing drugs. For example, I mean, and we see it in language. I know, again, you're in the UK, you work in the UK, but you also have the American experience. We
Mm.
see that when it was the crack epidemic which was disproportionately affecting black people, what did we see? We saw the language of the war on drugs. We saw that these criminals and
It's always a
fast
war
forward,
when it's black people. The war on drugs, the
exactly,
war on
exactly,
gangs.
exactly, war on this, war on that. Fast forward to 20 years later, or just a bit less than that, we find that there was an opioid crisis affecting white people, and that was deemed as a public health problem. You see what I mean? So that kind of contradiction in dealing with things is has for me has resulted in the attitudes that we have in society today. So
I
I ideally
definitely
believe,
think that
yeah,
the
Karen.
police are ill-equipped to deal with all of the dimensions of some of the problems today.
Hmm.
And I do think that the approach that we take as a society definitely doesn't deal with the underlying issues. The thing is, that's always been an age old issue with criminal law, right? So even if you look at domestic violence, for example, there's a huge debate as to is the criminalization of domestic abuse actually the best solution
Hmm.
to combat that problem? So,
Hmm.
what I mean is that everyone will agree, oh, domestic abuse is terrible. Yeah, lock up that guy, that's terrible. But actually, let's say that it's an abusive guy, he's been abusing, and I'm sorry to use gender stereotypes, but it's just a fact, and we're talking facts today.
Uh,
Real talk. It is a fact that it's
no,
more, it's
no.
more
Overwhelmingly, it's men. Obviously,
exactly.
overwhelmingly,
I
it's
wasn't
men. I'm
saying
not
that
gonna. I'm
it's
not gonna
only.
argue. I'm
I
not gonna
wasn't saying
argue
it's
with that.
only. So yeah, but it is more so. We see more
Oh,
men
100%.
abusing the
But
women.
again, I know
Go
I'm
on.
gonna probably get attacked for this, yeah.
Dun dun
But
dun.
no, no,
I
no,
like
no. But
controversy.
obviously,
Go.
at the same at the same time, we will never really truly understand the male victims of domestic violence, will we? We won't, will we? I'm not. And by the way, this is
When
me
you
as a
say we'll
disclaimer.
never really understand, what do you mean?
No, we'll never know. I'm saying that because who's more likely to report a domestic violence? Imagine
Oh, of
men will have a
course.
shame.
I was literally reading an article that a friend sent me just, was it this morning or yesterday? Actually, about a black man who was
Hmm.
saying that he was racially abused by his wife and her family. And he was married for 4 years. And it was really, really bad abuse. And then he finally has gotten out of that marriage. And he was saying that it's going to take him so much time to heal from that, and I think the police got called on one occasion and he was the
Yeah.
victim, and they didn't get it at all. And he was just saying that not only does society really struggle to understand, males being victims of domestic
Hmm.
violence, but he just said within our communities as well, there's such a stigma, and that he hasn't
Of course.
actually. He was an article in a main newspaper, and he anonymized himself and everything else,
Okay.
and he said he hadn't even told his family because he just didn't believe people would understand. They would literally just be asking him,
Mm.
how did this woman abuse you? But what I was trying to say
I
is
mean,
that,
look what happened with Johnny Depp recently as well, but not to detract at all.
oh,
Um, not to detract at all. I mean,
yeah.
again, we understand that overwhelmingly the victims of domestic violence are women. But please carry on.
No, all I was gonna say was that in terms of, like, the criminalization of domestic violence, on the one
Hmm.
hand, anyone who has an innate sense of justice will say, "Yep, that's what we should be doing. We should be locking these men up. They need to be punished." But actually, if you come down to, like, everyday cases, you might have a case where actually the victim has been abused for a really, really long time. Things
Hmm.
have reached a really terrible point, maybe on this
Yeah,
occasion, that the victim happened to call the police, or the victim didn't even call the police. Sometimes it's a neighbor,
the
right?
neighbor
Or
did,
it's a member of the public, whoever. So the
as
police,
was the case of the neighbors of Boris Johnson. But
well,
carry
yeah,
on when
and
they
so the
beefed.
police, so then the police come, we take this case all the way to court. And I'm talking in a situation where, let's say this woman has been, there's a history of abuse, but if you look at police records, there's no history, right? Because she's never called the
Yeah.
police before. No one's ever been alerted to this. And the guy, maybe he's got no previous convictions, he's never been convicted of anything, so it all goes through court. Maybe, let's just say maybe, because it was such a terrible attack or allegation on this occasion, he was kept in custody throughout the wait for the trial. He has the
Hmm.
trial. Let's say he gets convicted and he expresses a lot of remorse, and the judge says to him, "You know what? You've got no previous convictions. You've expressed a lot of remorse. You've got two children with this woman, blah, 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 blah." So they might fine him, right? Or give him a community
Mm.
order. Who is
Yes.
protecting her that day he comes out of prison?
No, you're
Who
right.
is protecting her that day he goes back home? And that's even saying if he did go to prison. And so
That's
I
true.
think what you're saying about reimagining the role of the police, I think that is crucial in a lot of different areas. And I personally do feel as though I have seen a shift in society when it comes to domestic violence as well, where there are now almost like plethora of different support mechanisms for victims of domestic abuse. And it's not
Hmm.
just saying to women, go to the police, report it, go to the police, report it, go to the police, report it. There are a lot
Hmm.
more support systems and support centers. And I definitely think as a society, yes, the criminal law has a role to play in keeping society safe, in upholding law and order, in maintaining justice. But I definitely think that we're clearly seeing also the terrible repercussions of a system. I feel like it's almost built it's almost built to fail, because in every country no criminal justice system is perfect, right?
Of
So
course.
if we're seeing all of that, do we not have to say, okay, now it's time to look outside the box? What
Yeah,
else should we
exactly.
be
And
doing?
reimagine, I think the term defund the police is used to and abolish the police. I think these things are designed to shock. And I was one of those people who at one time said, "What the hell are you talking about? Oh, what do you mean by abolish? Are you talking about, you know, letting the world be a world of anarchy and all these things?" But when I looked into people who I respect and people speak about abolition, I feel like, okay, a lot of the time is what we're saying is, by we, I don't mean I'm definitely signing up to that opinion, but what they are saying is that it's just about reimagining a world of how we do law and order in public. So, for example, they give, why is it that it's a police officer that has to do a traffic stop, for example? Obviously, again, it's
Yeah.
particularly the American context because traffic stops, we know, many times do end up with someone dead, or
Yeah.
sometimes can end up with someone dead. I don't think that's a controversial, a problematic idea, to be honest.
Yeah, I think, to be honest, if it is a more nuanced argument, then I'm not really aware of that. And I think for me, the reason why, as much as I am able to confidently talk about some of the issues that I see in law enforcement and that I see with the police, at the same
Hmm.
time, I know that we have some amazing police officers out there. And
Yeah, of course.
I know a lot of the police officers that form, for example, the Black Police Association, and a lot of them have been doing some incredible frontline work for a really, really long time within the community, trying to combat racism within the police force. So,
That's super interesting though, because I'll be honest with you, some of the worst experiences I've had with police are always the black ones. If I'm honest with you, And a lot
Wow.
of the and a lot of the time, and I know these archetypes have been spoken about extensively and
Yeah.
written about extensively. It's, and again, I don't want to put you in any position that kind of like, but this is my opinion. This is my opinion.
Yeah.
I find that many times people of color in, brown faces in high, or brown and black faces in high places, have to overcompensate. We see it throughout politics, we see it throughout, and we see it in the police. Like, it's almost like we have to, okay, in front of my white counterparts, I have to overcompensate. I mean, I'm sure you're aware of the case. Do you see the case where, I think, the police force escapes me now, the name of it, but it was to do with the kind of, a police officer documented how much racism took place in the office. The black people were referred to as monkeys. Black people
Mm.
were referred to as, going back to their own. They were told to go back to their own country if they don't like it here. This was a police force within the UK.
I think there's a lot of black officers and officers of color who will tell you that's been their experience as well of the police force. So the institutional racism in the police is definitely not something that is a secret, but that's the problem with tokenism, and that's the
Yeah,
problem which, again, I think we almost like touched upon earlier when I said the answer certainly isn't actually just representation. And
of
I'm
course.
always telling like my colleagues this. I feel like I have taught a lot of my colleagues this phrase, which is not all skin folk are kinfolk. And I
Tell
always
me
say
about
to
it.
them, just putting a black person on a panel for this, getting a black judge in power, all that kind of stuff, it can be the case sometimes. Actually, it's even worse. We see it with women as well. Sometimes, like, you'll find that a woman is harder on a woman than she is on her
Mm,
male counterparts. And I think it was the story of Khalif Browder, the juvenile in the
mm,
US, who I think he spent 3 years in Rikers Island without even being
yep,
charged for an offense before
yep.
tragically killing himself. I think in that, one of the judges who dealt with his case a lot and adjourned it a lot, leaving him to sort of rot away in solitary confinement, which has now been abolished for juveniles. I think it was a black judge, didn't they say? And I think maybe there was a
Hmm.
black district attorney and all sorts. And I think it was a black guy who was the head of the police union in New York at the
Let's just look
time.
at let's just look at Obama. Like,
Oh,
I
oh, you're
always,
gonna bring Beezy into this. Okay, all right.
of course I am, because
Uh,
Trump says the other day in his first debate against Joe Biden, he said that I have done more
more
for
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 African
any black people,
Americans.
for African Americans, than any president before me. That's what he said, and he said, Perhaps Abraham Lincoln might have done more. And obviously speaking about Abraham Lincoln because of the Emancipation Proclamation, but Abraham
Yeah.
Lincoln was also a racist. And then Twitter went mad. No, the person that did it more was FDR, Franklin D. Roosevelt, because if you know his story, he incorporated unions and African American groups integrated them more into politics. Someone said, no, I think it was Lyndon B. Johnson, even though Lyndon B. Johnson was a racist who referred to Fannie Lou Hamer as these uppity blacks. But anyway, I digress. People say Lyndon B. Johnson because he signed the Voting Rights Acts of 63 and 64, 63, I believe. And I thought to myself, how sad is it? Discussion of which president has done more for black people. Obama's name is not even in the mix. How sad is that?
So this is the thing, right? Representation in and of itself, I do think should not be underestimated as to the power that has within a
For
community.
symbolism, 100%. For
For
symbolism.
symbolism, yeah, for symbolism. However, I do also think that if our only hope is that people who look like us are the ones who care about us, we're in
So,
trouble.
yeah,
And
you're right.
that's even what I say to people literally about the criminal justice system. I say if it depended on, oh right, as long as you've got some black prosecutors, our cases will be fair, but the white people's won't be. That's problematic. That is
You're
completely
right.
problematic.
Yeah.
And so I think sometimes we take the wrong approach to
Okay.
representation, and what we're really shooting for when we're talking about diversifying things or diversifying professions and that kind of thing, what we're really talking about is almost like expanding people's experiences and making sure that,
I
like,
know
our
that's
humanity
a
is
very good
seen.
point. That's a very good, and that actually matches with the data. We found that. Do you know the most xenophobic people normally, even, and this is for the UK example, are normally amongst groups of people who do not experience the other. So
Oh
we
yeah, I
find
can
that, for
imagine.
example, in London, London is a beautiful melting pot that, London was the only major city that didn't vote towards Brexit.
Woo.
So it's quite funny. It's
And
quite funny that you find
tried
that
to be left behind. Do you remember that
exactly.
petition? They were like,
Yeah.
London should be allowed to stay within the EU. I'm like, okay, guys, chill.
You lot want to secede from the UK, like. No, but I find it's amazing that you find that people who do not interact with the other are the ones that have more of an issue with the other. But the ones that do live up with, interact and, mix with
Mm.
people, they have a good opinion of people, and I get that for me does speak to the human story, I guess.
But then I also think that though, when you take an oath or a pledge or choose to be in a position of responsibility, that's your duty. Whether or not you know black people, Asian people, Chinese people, white people, you've taken that responsibility to be fair and to be just. You should be doing that
We
in
should
any
hope.
event.
We should hope that. I mean, again,
It's not
I'm
even
more
hope. I feel like people need to be held accountable. It's like if you can't
100%,
do that, you actually cannot do your job. Like you're incompetent. In
a
other
100%.
areas of like the workforce, that's the end. Like you can't do your job. See you later. Here's your
No,
P45
it's
or
true,
whatever.
but it's true. But then, for how long? For me, that's why I'm not someone who is so pro reformist. I don't know if we can reform this system. I think it needs to be
Mm.
reimagined in many a time. I'm not sure. I'm not. Again. I prefaced my beginning of this saying my politics is pragmatic. My politics is try for every win you can. Go for, like, so for example, right now, no one's elated about Biden, but it's about trying for lesser of two evils. For example, in the UK, I'm not someone who
You say
ever
no
see.
one's elated for Biden. I think a lot of people are. It's that
So okay.
representation thing, isn't it? I think that there's a lot of people the same way. I don't know. Do you know the cartoon series Boondocks?
Yeah.
So
Yeah, of course.
Boondocks did a really good episode when they were like, "Oh, they're interviewing all the black people. Why are you voting for Obama?" And they're like, "Cause Obama's gonna do this for black people." And they're like, "Actually, he didn't do this for black people." And they're like, "Oh, well, he did this." And they're like, "No." And it turns out like all they saw was a black man, and they were like, "Yeah,
Yeah.
he's one of us." And I think that that same, if I can call it, Obama phenomenon has definitely happened with Biden. There's a lot of people who are like, yes, he's there for the black man because he was Obama's vice president and all this kind of stuff. So I think there are a lot of people who
I
are
don't know
elated.
if it. Okay, true, fair enough. I can concede that. I don't think it's as much elation as it is more of a thing of anti-Trump.
Yeah,
I
and a
don't
lot
know.
of relief. Yeah, a lot of people are
Yeah, a
just
lot of
going,
relief. I think
thank
it's
God we
more
got
of a
that
lot
man
of
out of
relief.
the White House.
Exactly. I think that's what it is. To be fair.
Yeah.
But talking again, I don't know. I personally not someone who's into reformism per se. I'm not. I'm just not sold on the idea that we can reform the system. But in moving on, we were speaking about. I don't know. We had me and you had an event, and uh, the lawyer Omran said something about coming to court as a black person if you wear a do rag and the kind of stereotypes you may encounter. So I want to talk a bit
Mm.
about court. Yeah, what are the things, the do's and don'ts for people who? Oh, wait, you're not even defense. Can I even talk to you about that?
Yeah, of course you can. Of course you can. Of course you can. It's not as I always say to people, our system, I feel like it's not the prosecution and defense are not as divided as people would like to think.
Oh, okay.
Like you will see prosecution like in America, like you barely see the two parties talking to each other. In the
Exactly.
UK, like you would see that all the time, like we're talking to each other, making sure the evidence has been served,
Oh, okay.
making sure we know what's going on. And in a lot of the time we have more lawyers, I would say, in the UK who both defend and prosecute, whereas in the US it's almost like a way of life, like you either defend
Yeah.
or you
You either on that
prosecute
side.
and you don't
Yeah.
move. But yeah, so you're asking about what the
Yes, coming to court wearing a do rag, is that problematic?
it's this is so difficult for me, right? Because my I find this so difficult because on the one hand, I really, really, really hate to
I thought you were
almost
gonna say you
like
hate do-rags.
panda.
I was
No,
I
I
was
just
about to
hate
what?
do-rags. I have no honestly, I'm completely indifferent to do-rags. Please don't start spreading rumors. They'll be like, "That prosecutor over there, she hates do-rags." No. No, I just
It's like I know you can't comment on this, but it's like someone spoke about our dear sister Kemu who works for the Tory front bench. And someone said, "That's how you know she's got problems because you can tell she doesn't
hmm.
sleep with any silk satin on her because her braids are tired." I was like,
Someone said that. Was that on Twitter? I bet you it was on Twitter.
"Yes, yes."
That is such a thing that like Black Twitter will literally come for you. That
Exactly.
is such a thing. Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh.
But yeah, cool.
No,
Let's talk about the do rag. The
no,
one
what
the
I was
panda
gonna
too.
say is that I hate pandering to things that are not fair, right? So on the
Mm-hmm.
one hand, there's always a part of me that's like, no, you should not have to change yourself or adapt yourself, blah, 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 blah. You're going in there to be judged based on the evidence. And so
That's the
a part of
ideal.
me wants to be like, no, you do you. You come however. Unfortunately, that's not the reality. And I think, unfortunately, you're asking me about the reality. And as I
Yeah,
said,
of
we're
course.
doing real talk. We're being honest, very honest here. And I personally would always say to people, dress smart when you're coming to court because you cannot go
Mhm.
wrong. You literally cannot go wrong dressing smart. And I mean like black and white smart. Like black, just wearing black and white, no one can say, oh, actually, that was too loud. That was this, that was whatever. I think it's, well, actually, I was about to say, I think it's even more so important in the Crown Court in a jury trial. But actually, the prejudices, human beings have prejudices and biases. And
Mhm.
unfortunately, the media and all sorts of sectors have not done the black community any favors in terms of how we are portrayed, right?
Mhm.
So I would definitely say if you can dress smart, dress smart. Literally as smart as you can.
On.
Dark colors and also just be serious. Like court is actually a serious thing. It is a serious
Mm,
thing and there's a lot at stake. I think sometimes people don't realize there's a lot at stake till it's too late or they just don't even
okay.
think that there's a lot at stake. But I think it's important also to present as though you care and you respect the solemnity of the occasion, if that makes sense.
The seriousness of it, yeah.
Yeah, so you're
The
not
kind of
playing around on your phone, you're
course.
not giggling, doing whatever. And you say of course, but I've seen it before where I think it was like about 4 or 5 defendants being tried for like a conspiracy in the Crown
Yeah.
Court and it was a jury trial and one of the defendants, I think to be honest, all of them, they were in the dock together. Sometimes they were giggling and talking and I think it was a conspiracy to commit like robbery and there had
Mm,
been some really violent, nasty robberies committed. So the jury are hearing about these terrible crimes and these poor, helpless victims. And then they're
mhm.
looking in the dock and seeing like 4 or 5 black boys sort of giggling, playing on their phones. I think one was playing on an iPad. And
What the hell?
I think it turns out that the defense advocate, his lawyer, actually gave him the iPad because she
What
was
the
like,
hell?
"This is a long and boring trial for the kid, you know? He's bored,
Yeah.
it's long, blah, blah, blah." And I just remember thinking, that's such awful legal advice, like awful legal advice to have
Exactly.
given him. There's so much at stake. But on the other hand, yeah, I do hate that because it was a kid, right? It was a juvenile. He was under 18. He was in the Crown
Okay.
Court because he was being tried with adult defendants. And
Mm,
it's a lot to say to like a kid, you must present this way, act this way, be this way. Whereas actually, we're in a tribunal that is supposed to be literally brought together to find the truth, to be truthful,
mm.
but you can't present the truth because people don't like it and people will judge it badly. So yeah, it's a tough one, but I think all I would say is like treat it almost like you would treat a proper job interview. There was a job
That's
that you wanted, that you actually valued, like you wanted to get this job and you wanted to
the
make a good
job is my
impression.
freedom though.
The job, unfortunately, yeah, the job that you're interviewing for is your liberty. So
Yeah.
it's the most important interview you ever go to. But that's what I say to people. I literally say that's all you can do. And then at the end of the day, unfortunately, sometimes even doing all of that is not going to change people's perceptions of
Yeah.
you. Alexandra
That's
Wilson was like all over the media recently, and bless her, like I've got a lot of respect for her because she's quite early on in her career and she's talking about race at the bar, race as a barrister. And
yeah.
she was talking about, and I think she actually, I know she's of mixed heritage, and she was talking about being mistaken for a defendant. And I was thinking, oh my gosh, we have all of
I
us
saw
have
those
been
kind of yeah.
mistaken for everything under the
No
sun. Like,
way. Even you?
yeah, I've been mistaken for all sorts of things. And when I used to go to the immigration tribunal, the one
Yeah.
that I always got was they just assumed I'm the interpreter. Always. And this was black people too, by the way. It wasn't
Oh,
just like white
no.
people. Like the amount of times I'll be there and they'll see the solicitor, they'll see me, and then they'll actually ask me in their language. Like I remember a Ghanaian lady asked me, and she's like, "Oh, I thought you were the Ga interpreter." And I was thinking, listen, if I was doing the interpreting, you'd be in trouble right now because my knowledge of Ga is zero. But no,
Oh.
it's terrible. It's to that point where even, and that's why I was saying I'm giving that advice with a pinch of salt about how the dues
Okay.
for court, right? Because even myself, dressed smart, dressed in a suit and all of that, I have been confused
Mm.
as being a defendant. I've been confused for being an interpreter. I've been confused. I think I was confused for being security, like just like building stuff.
Wow.
Like someone's asking me
Wow.
questions like that. And then the one that I used to get all the time, that actually from other barristers when I was a pupil barrister, junior barrister, was I was always confused for like the paralegal being asked to do the photocopying. Always. That used to like a barrister would come
Wow.
running into the CPS room and he'd just like throw something at me and say, quickly, quickly, the judge is waiting on this. I need 12 copies for the jury. At the very beginning of my career, actually, I wouldn't say anything.
Yeah.
I'd just take it and
Oh,
go
no.
go
Oh,
over to my
wow.
colleagues who were paralegals and I'd be like, "Hi Jen, do you mind doing 12 copies for the barrister in court, whatever?" And it was only until, because that's the horrible thing, I talk to a lot of people that I mentor now about how do you deal with microaggressions in the profession,
Yes.
what should you do? And that's why I said I've got a lot of respect for people like Alexandra who is speaking out even though she's so junior, because a lot of
Mhm.
us, we don't start talking freely the way I'm talking now till we
Okay,
are
okay,
in a
okay.
position where we feel we have the privilege, the security to be able to do that. Because it is such a cliquey profession, it's a tight knit profession. The bar is very small, people know things and know each other. And it was until I think I was in the CPS room talking to a black female barrister, and
Yes.
she was just amazing. Like till this day, I think she's so badass. But we were just having a chat, and we'd taken off our wigs and I actually think we were still wearing our gowns, but we're taking off our wigs. A lot of barristers don't wear them sort of around the court building, whatever. We're sitting in
Oh,
this
okay.
room, and there were lots of different barristers in the room. I'd probably say seven others. Some had their wigs on, some had their wigs off. I even think there were two white ladies who had taken off their gowns as well and just folded it, put it on the table. Everyone's just waiting around for different things. And that same thing happened to me. A white old barrister comes rushing in and throws something at me and says he needs it photocopied. And the woman just looked him up and down. This is a Caribbean lady, a barrister older than me. Looked him up and down, and she said in her perfect Queen's English, "How dare you? What on earth led you to believe that my learned friend and I are here to do your photocopying?"
Love it.
I just sat there, and when you just want to jump up and do like a standing ovation, I was like, oh my gosh, did she just do this? Everyone started talking in the room, and the guy just
Wow.
started going bright red, and he said, oh, I do beg your pardon. And she's like, honestly, there are people everywhere in this room, blah, 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 blah. You can see that counsel and I are wearing our gowns. I don't know what led you to believe this, that, and another. And the sad thing as well is, right, don't forget that when you do go to court, actually, a lot of
Yeah.
administrative staff are black.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of it does have to do with that affinity we have with our communities and wanting to say, oh, I want to work in the criminal justice system. I want to make a change. I want to make a difference. A lot of the young
Yeah.
paralegals I know, and even the older paralegals I know, it's linked to that. I'm not even going to lie. They could be doing
Oh,
any
okay.
sort of 9 to 5, but they wanted to work in the criminal justice system. They want to make a difference, that kind of thing. And they
Okay.
are actually subjected to that kind of like disrespect basically on a daily basis. So on the one hand, we're
Wow.
talking about, oh, actually, this is who I am. Do you know who I am? And I still get spoken to like this, but no one should be spoken to like that.
Exactly.
And I think
Exactly.
I sometimes I do think to myself, how disgusting is it that okay, I get to have that satisfaction of saying, actually, no, I'm not the defendant, I'm the barrister. But how about when you are the defendant?
Exactly.
You know, it's rubbish. So,
On speaking of when you said about jury a minute ago, and
mm,
obviously and the stereotypes and these kind of things. If I'm ever arrested, this is probably advice for me, yeah. And I pray that
you
I'm
will
not,
not
yeah.
be arrested,
if I
inshallah. That's not happening. But yeah,
if I ever am, where do I want to be tried?
that's an interesting question. So I'm not giving this as any sort of legal advice whatsoever. Disclaimer, massive disclaimer. I'm actually not giving it as legal advice. But people do say that statistically, juries acquit more. So you have a higher chance of acquittal in the Crown Court. Statistically, they say
Hmm.
that. Now, the reason why I say I'm not giving legal advice, I'm literally just talking as a lawyer, someone who works in the
Yeah.
system, is that the interesting thing is there are so many things to factor in, right? So the Crown Court is much more deals with much more serious offences than the
Hmm.
Magistrates Court. So on the
Yeah.
one hand, you could say, and also sorry, in the Magistrates Court, sometimes you have lay magistrates who are everyday people. They're not lawyers per se,
Yeah.
that they have done training, and they get advice from a legal advisor who's legally qualified. They'll get some advice from them. So,
Okay.
on the one hand, you might say that in the Crown Court, with a Crown Court judge in charge of things, and a Crown Court judge will have, years of extensive legal experience.
Yes.
Nothing's going to get by that judge. Nothing's going to get by that judge whatsoever. And everything is going to be done properly in the Crown Court
Hmm.
because it's just a lot more serious. Evidence has to be served, this has to happen, etc. Whereas the magistrates court is almost like a factory, right? They're churning through these
Hmm.
cases. There's this huge volume of cases, and they're going through them, going through them, going through them, going through them. A
Yes. Yes.
trial,
Yes.
sometimes you have 2 or 3 trials in one day, whereas in the Crown Court, it's usually they last days, sometimes weeks, right? So there
Yes.
are so many different things to weigh up. And then you could have, let's say, an assault, right? Some sort of,
Hmm.
it might have crossed the threshold to be what we call ABH, actual bodily harm. It's an
Yes. Yes.
assault, but maybe the injuries sustained weren't so serious. And so the defendant chose to have his trial in the magistrates court. It could be that that
Okay.
assault is the most serious thing those magistrates have ever seen before, they've ever heard. And they're like, wow, this is the worst crime we've ever seen. Whereas in the Crown Court, where they're
Oh.
dealing with murder and rape, they might be thinking, oh, that was like a minor offense. And so I think
Oh. Wow.
literally there's no hard and fast rule. And one of the things that defense lawyers, and I just always I say to people, always get legal advice. I'm biased, I'm a lawyer. I always say, if you are in trouble with the law, get legal advice. You are allowed free legal representation at the police station. You are allowed free legal representation at your first hearing at court. You need to get legal advice, because
But you know, so
actually
funny.
a defense
Sorry.
advocate will break that all down for you. Like they will break it all down to you. Where should I be choosing Crown Court or Magistrates Court? And they'll go through the pros and cons, but specifically to your case.
But it's interesting because on the man them always be like, no, go in, no comment, don't take legal advice, say no comment all the way, all the way. Is that like a hood fallacy then?
Hood fallacy. I just love that term. No, I don't think so, because on the other hand, right? If you're not taking, because I'm saying take legal advice, as in,
Yeah.
yeah, you need someone to advise you what you should be saying, what you shouldn't be saying. On the other hand, I wouldn't say it's necessarily a fallacy, because if for some reason you're not taking legal advice, there's definitely some merits perhaps in not commenting and avoiding it, saying something incriminating or saying something you might later change. But on the flip side of that, right? On the flip side of that, if you give a no comment interview
Yeah.
and they give you this warning before you do it, the court can be invited at a later stage to make what we call an adverse inference. So to
Okay.
the court are invited to conclude that your silence is more likely to have been because you were guilty.
Mhm.
And that's why I say
Mhm.
take legal advice, because even my
Exactly.
defense colleagues, they'll tell me, there are circumstances where even that adverse inference is better for the client to have just said no comment, even
Oh,
considering
wow.
what's going to happen later. But there are other times where they might actually say, yeah, we're not going to answer any questions, but we're going to do a prepared statement. And
Wow.
they
Okay,
make a
okay.
statement that they prepare along with you. So I wouldn't go as far as to say it's a complete fallacy, but as I said, I'm completely biased. I just
Take
think
legal
take the
advice. No,
legal
no, I think that's
advice.
fair. I've got a couple more questions for you.
Thought you're gonna say I've
'Cause my
I've got it written down. I'm making a little note.
I'm like, listen, I'm not planning to go there. Don't worry. A couple more. Just very basic, very briefly. Talk me through a typical day at work for you.
Ooh, that's a good question. So at this exact moment in time, I am a district crown prosecutor, which makes me like a legal manager. And so my days are
You're a
actually
boss. You're a boss.
I'm a bit of a boss.
All right.
I'm joking. Look how
Okay.
you draw me into these things, Here's me trying to be all like humble and like you just draw me in. But no, so I manage a team of prosecutors and I'm kind of responsible for cases that happen at a particular court. So in a given day, I might, for example, actually attend court. And if I'm
Okay.
physically at court, I might be there to observe one of our advocates just to make sure we do these things called homicide quality assessments to make sure
Okay.
our advocates are basically doing their job properly, which I
Okay.
think is good because that's obviously, again, we were talking about homicide safety nets and
Like checks and balances.
exactly, right? So there is
Yeah.
we go there to make sure like are they doing the right thing? Are they presenting the right evidence? And so like an example would be I was talking to an advocate the other day about like the importance of when you have an unrepresented defendant and we have as part of our case, let's say CCTV footage or body worn footage from a police body cam,
Hmm.
double checking with that defendant if they're unrepresented, have you seen it? Like maybe we sent it to
Oh,
them,
okay.
but did they have the means to play it? Have they definitely watched it? Did they understand it? Do they know what we're using it for? That kind of thing. So, like by going to court and doing those observations, make sure that happens.
Okay.
I also deal with what we call victim complaints. So, some people might be aware of something called the Victim's Right to Review. I think it came in around 2013 or 14. But
Hmm.
now, if you're a victim of a crime, you have the right, and the CPS either drops the case or we change the charges or whatever. You have different routes in which you can contact us essentially to complain and say, please look at it again.
Okay.
And I really actually enjoy that part of my job. I love that opportunity to say, okay, one of my colleagues did this, but I'm not even going to look at what their reasoning was, why they did it. Let me look at it
Mm.
fresh with my fresh eyes. Was that the right decision? Was that the wrong decision? And then talking to the victim or witness about that. So I spend time doing that as well. And then the rest of it really is like looking after my team, making sure that they're up to date with the latest legal challenges. If we've got like a big case coming into court or a high media interest case, make sure that everything, we're aware of that. We know
Oh,
we're
okay. So are you
supporting the
not in
court.
court a lot? Are you not in court these days, speaking in court, prosecuting
These
cases?
days, with COVID and in the current role that I'm doing, I am not in court that much. I'm not.
Okay.
Interestingly
But when
enough,
it's like when
though,
it's like the big cases, is that when you get involved?
when the camera crew's there. No, I'm joking. No, but even then, I'd probably, unless I have a reason to physically be there in court, as long as the advocate knows what they're doing and everything, they have the information, they have the support, the officer is
Yeah.
there. I wouldn't necessarily need to be there. But one thing I do find in this current role is that I miss the advocacy. So I'm definitely considering
Going back.
going back into Crown Court advocacy. But I think because of what we've been talking about in like changing the system and influencing things and making a difference, I
Hmm.
think I always thought it was important for me to try my hand at, because we say management, but some of it's leadership, isn't it? It's
Of
about
course.
getting into those positions of responsibility where you can actually influence change. And I've seen within my small team that I have a limited amount of power to influence that kind of change. And so that has been a good experience. But I think for a lot of us who are barristers, you just almost feel like I almost said a natural born advocate. Oh, I'm a natural born advocate. No, that sometimes you almost feel like it's your vocation.
Yeah,
Mm.
okay.
And it's almost like an art to an extent. There's a scene in The Good Wife where I loved that series, by the way, The Good Wife. People talk
I've
about
never watched it.
Suits and they talk about all the other ones, right? For some reason, I really liked The Good Wife. It's
The
brilliant.
Good Wife, listen, if it's not, what's the one with Annalise in it?
Do you know what? How to Get Away with
Viola
Murder.
Davis.
I
If it's not that one,
tried.
I don't.
I tried. I'm
No.
not even gonna say too much about it because I love Viola Davis so much, but I tried and I pushed myself through season 1 and nah. But there's a scene in The Good Wife. I'm not even cussing it because it's not that it was bad. It didn't grip me the same way.
It's okay.
Um,
It's okay.
but there's a scene where she comes home and, astaghfirullah, she pours a glass of red wine. Okay, I don't do this with the wine, but like she pours this glass of red wine and she sits back and she goes, "Oh, there's nothing better than a good cross. Like there's nothing better than a good cross examination." And I feel like every criminal lawyer knows that feeling. Like literally knows that feeling. Like there's something beautiful about the advocacy. There's something that is just really enjoyable about presenting the case, witness handling. And I say this almost like, I don't know how to explain it, but even that moment where you have like a really vulnerable victim or witness who's been the
Hmm.
victim of a terrible crime, and you're the one who's sort of able to talk to them before they go into court, give them that confidence to come into the courtroom, ask them the right questions in the right way,
Okay.
get the evidence out. You sit down and you just feel this sense of achievement. And then I think at the end of a case as well, you always feel like, do you know what? I made a difference. And that's even when someone gets acquitted, right? Even when
Yeah.
someone gets acquitted, I feel like, do you know what? Mashallah, I presented all the evidence. I did this, I did that, blah, blah, blah. I helped this person bring this case to court. Because don't forget, at that point, I would have reviewed the case and I would have believed that it's in the public interest and there's enough evidence
Of
to
course.
prosecute it. And you do feel good about it. So it's funny because the way I've just answered that question, I'm like, I'm totally due for a job change.
I was
Totally
just
going
about to
back to
say that, but
court.
just one misconception I want to, and this will be our final question. How much say does the victim have in dropping the case?
Oh, oh gosh. Wow. That's a really good question, Mamadou. That is a really, really good question. So it's not like it's not like America again.
Okay.
I feel like it's almost as though like America's our secret punching bag in this session, where
No,
it's like not like
the problem
USA.
is, it's like because I mean our culturally is American,
Mm,
isn't it? Like all our films, our movies, we learn. I mean, the thing is that
exactly.
the biggest thing I tell young people, is the people that I mentor and speak to, and if they want to go into law, I'm like, do you know UK law is boring? Yeah,
Yeah,
it's
it's
not like that. It's not like I've watched like OJ, and be like, yeah, I'm gonna. No, UK law is hella boring. Like I've been there. I've
Oh,
been in there. I got a law degree. So when I was doing all of
yeah.
that, I was like, nah, this is dead. They might not even have like. There's no pizzazz.
Mamadou, when I was working, I'm gonna come back to your question. When I was working in the USA, I had the absolutely incredible opportunity to work on a murder trial in Miami, right? So
Okay.
we're going to court, and it's this alleged Haitian gang murder. And there was actually in this case one defendant on trial, but
Okay.
they were saying he was a member of this Haitian violent gang of like nine, was it nine? Yeah, I think it was nine of them, right? And I was working on the defense side. Again, that completely absolutely blew their minds over there. They're like, so in the UK, you're like a state attorney, but you're working with defense, and I'm like,
That was amazing. That's an
yes.
amazing accent.
No, honestly, I got that all the time over there. They couldn't get their heads around it. And actually I did help them a lot when they were trying to get evidence from the DA's office or the state attorney's
Okay.
office. Because they were like, just call them out with your English accent and tell them you are also a state attorney. And weirdly enough, that was a crazy thing about that country. It would work, and then they'd start talking to me and like want to swap stories and all sorts of madness. But anyway, in this
Wow.
Haitian murder trial, I have watched TV like everybody else. As I said, I've
Yeah.
watched all the legal series, all the legal dramas from Ally McBeal to Suits and How to Get Away with Murder. So I have
Yeah.
seen it all before, don't get me wrong. But I just cannot tell you how like this trial begins. And the prosecutor, he sort of walks
Please
into
tell
the
me.
he just walks into the middle of the courtroom. And that's another thing, right? You'll notice in a British court, like we're almost like tied to our desks. Like we don't
Yeah.
move, right? We do not come round, and we would only really approach the bench. Like it's so rare that we approach the bench. Like, why are we approaching the bench for? So this guy, he just walks into the middle, the well of the courtroom, where like the judge is really close to the judge and the jury goes all the way up to them. And then he unveils this huge, like, what would you call it, like a poster board, and he puts it on this
Okay.
easel and then flips it around. I couldn't believe it. It
He flipped
had
on
all
what?
these
Sorry?
mug shots. It was like a cardboard board, almost like a big
Like a,
poster, and
like a storyboard.
it's got mug shots of like
Oh,
these 9 black men, and the
okay.
heading on it is like the something something gang, and it's like all like red writing, like almost like this was like an art project. Like it was literally like the poster of some sort of like violent new film, new blockbuster coming out in the cinema. And I just thought, astaghfirullah, like if I did that in England, the judge would be like, Miss Shehu, have you lost your mind? Like she'd like throw the case out. Like you've already like prejudiced the whole jury. Like you've shown the defendant's face in a really scary poster with the title like gang. Like why are we even doing a trial? And he was like,
Oh,
these are
wow.
the faces of the gang. And like you can see the
Oh,
jury were
wow.
like, oh my gosh. And he just starts telling this bizarre story. And he was just like, we are here to tell you about terrible crimes you could never imagine, rape, murder. And I was just like, what on earth is going on? And I sat there and I just couldn't believe it. And then at some point, obviously, defense then objected to something. And then, like, defense jumped up. And then the prosecutor was like, no, 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 no. They start arguing. The judge is like, order, come to my, like, approach the bench. And then they're like looking really animated at the bench. And I just remember thinking, damn, this country is something else. I don't even think I could. I don't know how I would practice it. I'd be so polite. They'd probably like walk all over me because like we just don't do that.
We don't
It's
have the same
even
thing, do we?
it's even bad etiquette, Mamadou, right? For 2 barristers to be standing at the same time. So
Oh.
if your opponent
Oh,
says something you
UK is just
don't like,
different.
you should wait till he finishes talking and then you rise to your feet. And if he's really upset and he rises to his feet, it's really bad etiquette and you've got to sit back down, let them finish, then you rise. Yeah. We're so English about it. So yeah, all you kids who want to
Wow.
get into law and you watch American dramas, let me tell you, it is exciting in the UK, but it's nothing like you see in
It's not
America.
theatrical, is it? It's not theatrical like the
Not at
American
all.
court.
Oh my gosh, not at all. Anyway, sorry, I digress. You said last question, so let me be
That
good.
was a question, yeah. How much leeway, how much say does the victim have in dropping a case
Um,
in the UK?
it's hard to quantify it,
Okay.
but and this is going to sound like such a corporate answer, so I apologize in advance. But in all prosecutorial decisions, we take the views of the victims and the witnesses into account. We do take it
Okay.
into account, but ultimately, prosecutors are bound by a 2-part test where we have to
Okay.
always ask ourselves, is there sufficient evidence to provide a realistic prospect of conviction? And
Hmm.
is it in the public interest to prosecute this case?
Okay.
Sometimes, if it's a key witness and they do not support the prosecution and they
Yeah.
completely pull out, they don't give a statement, they don't do anything, they refuse to come to court, potentially then you don't have enough evidence.
Okay.
And that's why the case would fail.
Oh, okay,
Or,
okay, okay.
depending on the circumstances and why they're pulling out, that might make us say, actually, do you know what? It's not in the public interest because it's going to cause more harm than good.
Mhm.
That being said, reluctant witnesses can be summoned, which means
Oh,
they can be, there's like a legal document that can be served on them that says they have to come to court. And if they don't, the police can almost like bring you to court. But again, that would only happen in a case where the public interest, let's say, was so strong, like it was a really terrible case, your evidence is really, really needed, and it's
okay,
been
yeah, yeah,
assessed that
yeah.
it's not gonna, cause you more harm than good. Because as well, there's so many things that we have to balance as prosecutors. So one of the things, for example, is you don't want someone to have such a terrible experience of giving evidence that actually if they're a victim of crime in the future, they won't engage in the process in the future.
Yes.
And so it's a massive balancing act, but how we quantify that is really difficult to sort of summarize. And I think the final thing that I'd say on that point is that one thing that you would find sometimes is I would find maybe like junior defense advocates, let's say in a domestic abuse case, they'd say to me, like,
Yeah.
oh, just so you know, your victim has turned up at court with my client. So, you might want to have a word with your victim or whatever,
Yes.
and with the term we use is take instructions. And so
Okay.
they'd say you might need to, have a conversation with your client. And I'd always feel a little bit pompous because I feel like saying, my client is technically the queen. I don't have a client. As a prosecutor, I don't represent the victim. I'm there to make
Yes.
sure justice is done for you, but actually, I'm not, you can't say to me, drop the case, push forward the case. If not, you'd get all sorts of vengeful prosecutions, right?
Of course.
And
Of
so
course.
sometimes they'd say that to me, and they'd be really smug, "Oh, you're gonna drop the case." And I'd be like, "Well, I'm not actually because it was caught on CCTV." Or it's like, "Well, actually, I'm not gonna drop it because, the neighbor saw it. The neighbor saw everything."
Yeah.
So even if she is now saying, "I love him, he didn't touch me," we have a really credible eyewitness who saw everything. Sorry to keep
Hmm.
using domestic abuse examples, but sometimes they're just the easiest to illustrate. So what I would say is that victims and witnesses definitely have a say, and we try our best to like include them in every sort of step of the way of the prosecution,
Yeah.
but they definitely don't have the final say or the overarching say. And I think that's a safeguard that people should be happy exists, if I can put it that way.
Brilliant. Brilliant. You are a force of good. You have not. I'm not convinced of the system, but I do wish there were more people like you in the system.
Oh, thank you. And honestly, those of us who work in it, we're also not completely convinced in the system, which is why I thought the way you started these questions was a beautiful thing, because I think often when you're trying to make a difference, you do often have to stop and, yeah, stop and question as well. How much difference can you make? And is it enough? And can
100%.
your skills be used elsewhere? And maybe if we have this same conversation in 5 years' time, who knows? Who knows what my answers will be? But I enjoyed it, and I'm just checking myself. I'm like, am I still in one piece? Did I survive Mama D's podcast? I'm such a
Ah, come on. I wasn't even harsh on you. I wasn't even harsh on you.
no, I'm such a fan of this podcast, and still, I was so
No,
excited
thank
and
you.
gassed when you invited me, but then I started getting nervous. I thought, what's he gonna ask me?
A big prosecutor like you be prosecuting cases you're never so small, Mama. Do it's okay. It's funny because it should be interesting. I'm speaking to defense on next week actually, so it should be interesting.
Oh,
I've had US
amazing,
prosecution, now I'm gonna have defense.
amazing.
But
And then
brilliant.
we
Thank
need
you
to get you
so
a
much.
judge.
That'll be super interesting, you know.
We'll
That'll be super
talk
interesting to have a judge
offline.
actually.
Let's
We'll
have a
talk
chat.
anyway. Definitely. All right, then brilliant. Yeah, take care, Howard. Yeah,
Thank
take
you
care.
so much. All right, bye.
Bye. This is the Malcolm Effect. Please like, comment, subscribe wherever you're listening from, whether it's YouTube, Apple Podcast, or Spotify.